There are things in the woods that don't belong in any biology textbook. Things that move wrong, breathe wrong, exist wrong. I learned that the hard way on a camping trip that should have been routine. What I saw out there, what followed me back to my tent. I still check my windows every night before bed. My name's Connor, and this happened 3 years ago in the Cascade Mountains. I'm telling you this because whatever it was, I don't think it stayed in those woods. I'd been camping since I was a kid. My dad taught me everything. How to set up shelter, purify water, read animal tracks. By the time I was 26, I'd done dozens of solo trips without incident. The wilderness was my therapy, my escape from the noise of Portland. That October weekend was supposed to be no different. I parked at the trailhead Friday afternoon, hiked 4 miles into a valley I'd been to twice before, and set up camp near a stream. The weather was perfect, cold enough to keep the bugs away, but not freezing. Clear skies, the kind of conditions that make you feel invincible. The first night was normal. I made dinner, watched the stars, listened to the water. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up to silence. Complete, suffocating silence. The stream had been babbling constantly since I'd arrived, but now nothing. No water, no wind, no insects. It was like someone had pressed mute on the entire forest. I lay there in my sleeping bag, heart starting to pick up speed, listening. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Not animal footsteps. These were rhythmic, deliberate, bipedal, human, circling my tent. I didn't move. My headlamp was right next to my pillow, but I was terrified to reach for it, terrified to make noise. The footsteps stopped directly outside my tent door. I could hear breathing, heavy, wet breathing, like someone with fluid in their lungs. Then, and this is the part that still makes my skin crawl, I heard it sniff. Long, deep inhalations, like it was sampling my scent. I held my breath until my chest burned. After what felt like hours, but was probably 2 minutes, the footsteps moved away. The stream started flowing again. The forest came back to life. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. When dawn broke, I unzipped my tent and checked the ground. The dirt around my campsite was soft from recent rain, perfect for tracks. And there they were. Footprints. Barefoot. Human-shaped but wrong. The toes were too long, the spacing too wide, and the impressions were deep. Whatever made them was heavy. They circled my tent exactly as I had heard, stopping at my door. But here's what made me pack up immediately. The tracks didn't lead anywhere. They started 20 feet from my tent, circled it, then just stopped, like whatever made them had simply vanished. I should have left right then. I should have hiked straight back to my car. But pride, or maybe stupidity, made me stay. I told myself it was probably just another hiker, someone disoriented in the dark. The footprints were just odd because of the mud. I spent the day hiking, trying to shake off the unease. By evening, I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Almost. Night 2 was when everything went wrong. I built my fire bigger than necessary, kept my knife within arm's reach. Around midnight, I was sitting by the flames when I noticed something at the edge of the firelight. A shape. Tall. Impossibly tall. Standing between 2 trees about 30 feet away, just outside the circle of light. I grabbed my flashlight and pointed it directly at the spot. For a split second, maybe half a second, I saw it. A figure easily 7 feet tall, emaciated. Skin that looked gray or possibly bark-like in the beam of light. But the face. God, the face. Too long. Eyes too far apart. Catching the light like an animal's. Mouth slightly open, revealing what looked like too many teeth. Then it was gone. Not running, not moving. Just gone. Like it had been a trick of shadow. But I knew what I'd seen. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But I also knew running in the dark, panicked, was how people died in the wilderness. I threw everything into my tent, doused my fire, and sealed myself inside. I sat with my back against my pack, knife in one hand, flashlight in the other, listening. It came back an hour later. The footsteps circled again, faster this time. Then I heard something that almost made me scream. Scratching. Long, deliberate scratches against the rained fly of my tent. Not claws. These sounded harder, like bone on nylon. The scratching moved from one side of the tent to the other, always just above my head. Then the breathing started again, right at my door. That same wet, rattling sound. And then it spoke. Not words, not exactly, but sounds that mimicked speech. Rhythm and cadence that almost formed sentences, but in no language I'd ever heard. It was trying to communicate, or worse, trying to lure me out. The sound made my teeth ache, made my eyes water. I don't know how long it lasted. Time stopped meaning anything. At some point, I must have passed out from pure exhaustion and terror, because I woke up to morning light. The scratches on my tent were real. Long, deep gouges in the fabric, some almost penetrating through. The footprints were back, more of them this time, circling wider. But there was something new. About 15 feet from my tent, arranged in a careful line, were 7 stones. Perfectly smooth river rocks, placed in order of size. I hadn't seen those stones anywhere near my camp. Whatever that thing was, it had brought them, left them for me. A message maybe, or a warning. I packed up in 20 minutes and hiked out. Didn't stop until I reached my car. The entire hike back, I felt watched. Heard branches breaking behind me that were too heavy to be deer. Twice, I spun around convinced something was right behind me, but saw nothing. Just empty trail. I reported it to the rangers. They listened politely, took notes, said they had a few unusual reports from that area, but nothing concrete. One ranger, an older guy who'd worked there for decades, pulled me aside as I was leaving. He asked me to describe what I'd seen again. When I finished, he just nodded slowly and said, "You're the 3rd person this year to see something like that in that valley. My advice? Find somewhere else to camp." That was 3 years ago. I still camp, but never alone and never in that area. I've looked into it, researched every cryptid report, every indigenous legend from that region. The Cascade Mountains have stories. Things with too many joints. Things that walk like men but aren't. Things that collect stones. The locals have names for them. Names I won't repeat because I don't want to attract attention. What I do know is that I wasn't dealing with a bear or a cougar or a disoriented hiker. I was being hunted, studied, maybe even toyed with. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that wet breathing in my memory. And sometimes, I swear I hear it outside my window. I live in the city now, surrounded by people and light and noise. But it doesn't matter, because whatever I encountered in those woods, I think it knows where I am. I think it's been to my apartment. 3 weeks ago, I found 7 smooth stones on my balcony, arranged in perfect order by size. Some memories fade with time. Others dig deeper, become sharper, more vivid until they feel like they happened yesterday. What I'm about to tell you happened when I was 17, in the pine forests of northern Michigan. 22 years later, I can still smell the smoke from our campfire, still feel the cold that settled into my bones that night. My name's Rebecca, and I've never told this story publicly before. My family thinks I made it up, that I had some kind of episode. But I know what I saw. I know what touched me. It was supposed to be a fun weekend. My boyfriend Tyler, my best friend Jenna, and her boyfriend Brett decided to camp at this semi-remote spot Brett knew about. His uncle owned property out there. 40 acres of dense pine forest with a small clearing and a pond. We drove up Friday after school, already planning the usual teenage camping stuff. Drinking cheap beer, telling ghost stories, maybe skinny dipping if we got brave enough. It was late September, that perfect autumn, weather where the days are warm but the nights get cold fast. We set up 2 tents in the clearing, got a fire going, cooked hot dogs. Everything was normal. Great even. We were laughing, playing music from a battery-powered speaker, feeling very grown-up and independent. Around 10, Brett started telling the story about the property, how his uncle had bought it cheap because locals said it was bad land. Hunters avoided it. Animals acted strange there. A few people had gone missing over the years, though nothing was ever proven. We laughed it off as small-town superstition, the kind of thing meant to scare city kids. Around midnight, Jenna said she needed to pee and asked me to come with her. We grabbed a flashlight and walked maybe 50 feet into the tree line. That's when we heard it. A child crying, clear as day. A little kid, sobbing, somewhere deeper in the woods. Jenna and I froze, looked at each other. The crying continued, desperate and heartbroken. My first instinct was to help. Some lost kid was out there, terrified and alone. But something felt wrong. We were miles from any houses. It was nearly 1 in the morning. What would a child be doing out here? Jenna called out, "Hello? Are you okay? Where are you?" The crying stopped instantly. Complete silence. Then it started again, but closer, much closer. And now that it was nearer, I could hear it wasn't quite right. The rhythm was off. Too regular, too repetitive, like a recording on a loop. Jenna grabbed my arm, said we should get the guys. We started backing toward camp, keeping our flashlight pointed at the woods. The crying followed us, moved with us, always staying just out of sight. We practically ran back to the fire, told Tyler and Brett what we'd heard. Brett got this look on his face, somewhere between scared and embarrassed. He admitted his uncle had warned him about sounds in these woods, told him to never, ever follow them, said people who did never came back the same. Tyler, trying to act tough, said it was probably a fox or a bobcat. They can sound like screaming babies sometimes. But I'd heard those sounds before on nature documentaries. This wasn't that. We decided to stay close to the fire, keep it burning big and bright. Safety in numbers and light. For about an hour, nothing happened. We were starting to relax, starting to think maybe it had just been an animal after all. Then Brett went pale and pointed behind me. I turned around. At the edge of the firelight, maybe 20 feet away, stood a child. A little boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, wearing old-fashioned clothing. Overalls, no shirt. He was barefoot, completely still, staring at us. Not crying, just staring. "Hey, buddy," Tyler called out. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The boy didn't respond, didn't blink, didn't move. Just stared with eyes that caught the firelight wrong, reflected it like an animal's. My stomach dropped. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong with this child. The way he stood, too rigid, too still. No child stands that still. No child has eyes that reflect light. Brett stood up slowly, said we should get in the tents. Now, there was real fear in his voice, the kind that's contagious. We started moving backward toward the tents, keeping our eyes on the boy. That's when he smiled. Wide, too wide. A grin that split his face nearly ear to ear, revealing teeth that looked sharp. Too many of them wrong. And then he took a step forward. Not a normal step. His leg moved in segments, like it had extra joints. We ran. All 4 of us scrambled into one tent, Jenna's, because it was closest. We zipped it shut and huddled together, breathing hard, not speaking. Outside, we heard small footsteps walking around the tent. Slow, deliberate circles. The child, or whatever it was humming now. A tuneless, droning hum that made my head hurt. Then came the voice. "Come out and play. Come out and play with me. I'm so lonely. Come out and play." Over and over in a flat, emotionless tone. This went on for hours. Sometimes the voice was right outside the tent. Sometimes it sounded like it was coming from multiple directions at once. Once, I saw a small hand press against the tent wall from outside. Fingers too long. Too many knuckles. Brett was praying under his breath. Jenna was crying silently. Tyler had his knife out, hand shaking so badly he could barely hold it. I just kept thinking this wasn't real, couldn't be real. Somewhere around 4 in the morning, everything stopped. The humming, the voice, The footsteps. Gone. We waited until we could see daylight through the tent before we even considered moving. When we finally emerged, the campsite was trashed. Our food scattered everywhere, tent poles bent, sleeping bags torn apart, and in the dirt near the dead fire were small footprints. Child-sized, but they didn't look right. The toes were splayed too wide, the heel too narrow, and they were burned into the ground, like whatever made them had been hot enough to scorch the earth. We left everything behind, packed only our keys and wallets, and ran to the car. The whole drive back, none of us spoke. When we reached town, we reported it to the local sheriff. He listened, took notes, but I could see he didn't believe us. Probably thought we'd gotten high and freaked ourselves out. He said he'd send someone to check the property, but I don't think he ever did. Brett's uncle sold that land 6 months later. Took a huge loss just to get rid of it. Brett told me his uncle said he'd seen things out there too, years ago. That's why he never used the property himself. I've done research since then. That part of Michigan has stories going back hundreds of years. Indigenous legends about mimics, shapeshifters, things that lure people into the woods using familiar sounds and faces. Europeans, settlers reported similar encounters. There's even a name for them in the local folklore, but I won't say it here. Jenna and I aren't friends anymore. We tried, but neither of us could look at the other without remembering that night. Tyler and I broke up a month later. Brett moved to California after college. We all scattered, ran from what we'd seen. I'm 39 now, married, have 2 kids. I live in a suburb in Ohio, about as far from wilderness as you can get. My kids ask why we never go camping, and I make excuses. Too busy, too expensive, too much hassle. But the truth is simpler and more terrible. I know what's out there in the dark places. I know the woods aren't empty. They're full of things that watch, that wait, that hunger. And the worst part? Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet, I hear humming. That same tuneless, droning hum from 22 years ago. And I know, that whatever we encountered that night, it hasn't forgotten about me. It's patient. And one day, when I let my guard down, it'll ask me again. Come out and play. I don't believe in coincidences anymore. Not after what happened in Alaska. When you experience something that defies every natural law you thought you understood, you start seeing patterns everywhere. Connections. Warnings. My name's Julian. I'm a wildlife photographer. And 3 years ago, I spent 2 weeks in the Alaskan wilderness that changed everything I thought I knew about what shares this planet with us. I'd been commissioned by a nature magazine to photograph wolves. Gray wolves specifically. A pack that had been documented in the Denali region. It was November, early winter, brutal cold but stunning landscape. I'd done shoots in harsh conditions before, Antarctica, northern Canada, Iceland. I knew how to survive, how to stay safe, or so I thought. I flew into Fairbanks, hired a bush pilot to drop me at a remote location with a planned pickup 2 weeks later. Standard stuff. I had a satellite phone, plenty of supplies, cold weather gear rated for 40 below. I was prepared for everything except what actually happened. The first week went perfectly. I tracked the wolf pack, got incredible photos, documented their behavior. The pack was 10 strong, led by a massive alpha male with silver-gray fur. They tolerated my presence at a distance, went about their lives while I observed. It was exactly what I'd hoped for. Professional success, beautiful isolation, nature at its most raw and real. At night, I camped my 4-season tent, edit photos on my laptop, heat freeze-dried meals. The aurora borealis put on shows that made me feel like the luckiest person alive. Then, on day 8, the wolves left. All of them. I woke up that morning, and they were just gone. No tracks leading away. No signs of a hunt or migration. They simply vanished. I spent 2 days searching for them, expanding my radius, checking all their usual territories. Nothing. It was like they'd evaporated. What made it stranger was the silence. Alaska wilderness is never truly quiet. There's wind, birds, small mammals. But suddenly, everything was muted. Wrong. The air felt heavy, oppressive. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to call for an early extraction. But I had 5 days left on assignment, and pride kept me there. The first night alone, the 9th night of my trip, I heard something walking around my tent. Heavy footsteps, but not bear heavy. These were lighter, more careful, calculated. I assumed it was a caribou or maybe a moose, though both would be unusual that close to camp. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped my tent, and shined the beam out into the darkness. 2 eyes reflected back at me. Yellow-green, about 6 feet off the ground. Too high for a wolf, too low for a moose. And they didn't move. Just stared, unblinking. I yelled, tried to scare whatever was away. The eyes blinked once, slowly, then were gone. I didn't sleep that night. Sat with my back against my pack, bear spray in one hand, knife in the other. When dawn came, I went outside to check for tracks. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, perfect tracking conditions. And there they were. Prints I'd never seen before. Didn't match anything in my mental catalog of North American wildlife. They were canine-like, but huge. Bigger than any wolf print I'd ever documented. The stride length was impossible, at least 6 feet between prints. Whatever made them was either running or had legs far longer than any animal I knew. The prints circled my entire camp, twice, then headed north into deeper wilderness. Professional curiosity overrode my fear. I'm ashamed to admit that now, but it's true. I thought I'd discovered something unknown, maybe a rare subspecies, or a mutation. I imagined the photos I could get, the recognition. So I followed the tracks. Stupid. Monumentally stupid. But I convinced myself it was daylight. I had my sat phone. I'd be careful. I tracked for about 2 miles, the prints consistent and clear. Then they led to a clearing, where I found something that made my blood turn cold. A circle, probably 40 feet in diameter, where every tree had been stripped of bark. Not gnawed or scratched, stripped, peeled away in perfect vertical lines, revealing white wood underneath. In the center of the circle was a pile. Bones. Dozens of animal bones arranged in a careful mound. Caribou, moose, smaller mammals I couldn't identify. But they weren't scattered like a kill site. They were clean, organized, placed. I took photos, hands shaking. This wasn't natural animal behavior. This was deliberate, intelligent. As I was photographing, I heard a sound behind me. A huffing, snorting breath. I turned slowly. At the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by trees, was something I still can't fully describe. It was massive, easily 8 or 9 feet tall, standing upright, covered in dark fur, but the shape was wrong for a bear. Too narrow in the torso, too long in the limbs. The head was large, canine-like, but with a pronounced sagittal crest like a gorilla, and it was watching me with an intelligence that was absolutely terrifying. This wasn't an animal. This was something that understood I was there, understood I'd found its territory, its cache. We locked eyes for maybe 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I saw recognition, calculation, decision-making. Then it dropped to all fours and charged. I've never moved faster in my life. I ran, camera gear forgotten, survival instinct taking over completely. It was behind me, crashing through brush, fast, impossibly fast. I could hear its breathing, a wet snarling sound, getting closer. I didn't look back, just ran, branches whipping my face, legs burning. I don't know how long I ran. Time stopped having meaning. At some point, I burst through the tree line onto a frozen lake. Bad move. My feet went out from under me on the ice and I slid, skidded to a stop 30 feet from shore. I rolled over, certain it was right behind me, ready to die, but it had stopped at the tree line. Standing there, upright again, watching. It didn't step onto the ice. Some instinct, some knowledge of the danger. We stared at each other across the frozen expanse, both breathing hard. Then, slowly, deliberately, it turned and walked back into the forest. Not on all fours. Bipedal. Like a man. I laid there on the ice for probably 20 minutes, too terrified to move, too shocked to think. When I finally got up, I went back to camp the long way, skirting the lake's edge. I packed everything in 15 minutes, called my bush pilot on the sat phone, and begged him to come early. He couldn't get there until the next morning, weather and daylight issues. I spent that night in my tent with every light I had on, bear spray and knife in my lap, listening. It came back. I heard it circle my camp again, heard it test the tent fabric, claws or teeth catching on the nylon. But it didn't try to force its way in. It just watched, waited. When the pilot arrived at dawn, I threw my gear in the plane and didn't explain why I was leaving early. On the flight back, I looked down at the wilderness below. Endless miles of forest and mountain and ice. And I realized how arrogant I'd been, thinking I understood this place, thinking I knew what lived there. We've mapped the entire planet, cataloged thousands of species. But there are still dark corners, still things we haven't found, or maybe things that don't want to be found. I tried to report what I'd seen to Alaska Fish and Game. They listened politely, said they'd look into it. I know they didn't. I tried posting about it online, but got torn apart by skeptics and accused of hoaxing for attention. My editor at the magazine killed the story, said it was too controversial without proof. I had photos of the stripped trees, of the bone pile, but my camera with the photos of the creature itself, I dropped it when I ran. It's still out there, if it survived the elements. I don't do wilderness photography anymore. I take portraits now, weddings, corporate headshots, safe, controlled environments. My wife thinks I had a breakdown in Alaska, some kind of isolation-induced psychosis. Maybe I did. Maybe it's easier to believe that than to accept what I saw. But 3 months ago, I got a package at my studio. No return address. Inside was my camera, the one I'd dropped in that clearing. The memory card was gone, but there was something else. A single photo, printed, tucked inside the camera bag. It was a photo I didn't take. Couldn't have taken. It showed me, sleeping in my tent, photographed from outside through the mesh door. The angle, the distance. It was taken by something tall, something with hands. The metadata on the back, stamped by the printer, showed it was processed in Fairbanks 2 weeks ago. Whatever I encountered in those woods, it kept my camera, it developed my photos, and it knows where I live. I'm telling this story now because I don't think staying silent will protect me anymore. I think it wants me to remember, wants me to know I'm not forgotten. And late at night, when I'm alone in my studio, I sometimes see movement in the parking lot outside. Something tall and dark, watching from the tree line at the property edge. It's patient, and I think eventually it's going to come collect what I took from its territory. Me.